Hey everybody, Brett from AstartesGaming here, back with another Mountain Blade 2 Bannerlord developer blog video. So today we're checking out another Q&A, this one for March 15th, 2018, and it is with Korneel Guns, who is one of the devs responsible for multiplayer. So let's go ahead and dive on in. Greetings, warriors of Calradia. For many people, Mountain Blade Warband is a single-player experience which lets them rise from the rank of a commoner up to the ruler of an entire kingdom, developing their character and fighting in epic sieges along the way. I wouldn't call the sieges in Warband epic necessarily, but the battles, sure. For others, it is an opportunity to run around naked with a two-handed sword and test their combat skills against players from all around the world. In this week's blog, we talk about the person responsible for making these equally epic and sometimes silly experiences a reality in Bannerlord. Alright, so he's from East Flanders, Belgium. He's joined fairly recently, and his official job description is gameplay programmer. So what does he do during the day? Most of the time I work on multiplayer features, optimizations, and bug fixes. What I actually do varies from day to day depending on what we're trying to achieve that week. Lately, I don't get to write much code at all, and instead most of my time is spent preparing our internal playtests, monitoring the sessions, gathering feedback from the participants, and planning for the next test. So that makes sense. I imagine a lot of the code has probably been written already. So from here on out, they're probably just going to be continually testing it, making sure things are well optimized and fun, and then, you know, trying to squash any bugs they come across. And I imagine a lot of the code, if any, that he writes lately is more geared toward, you know, fixing existing code than introducing new code. So what does he like most about Bannerlord? There's many things. Sometimes I just open a custom battle, put the troop count into the many hundreds, give command over my troops to the AI, and just watch as the armies clash. There's something very special about seeing this many troops doing their thing. I imagine, yeah, we've seen a little bit of gameplay with very large armies, but I don't think a lot of people appreciate the scale of these battles versus Warband. I've addressed this in other videos, but Warband's engine just cannot handle battles that big. Even if you have a fairly beefy computer, the engine will crap out well before your hardware does. So there's a limit on how big you can make the battles, and some of that depends on, you know, whether you're running native or mods and what mods you're running. But the battles are somewhat limited, and from what we've seen of Bannerlord, despite it looking far and away, you know, better in terms of graphic fidelity, the battles, even the smallest ones we've seen, are substantially larger than Warband's, and some of the bigger battles that we've seen are massive, like infantry formations that stretch like as far as you can see almost into the, like I think there's one in a forest setting where two armies clash in sort of like a river, like a dried out riverbed type thing, but the sizes of the armies in that, just the infantry, is like, I think, bigger than any Warband battle I've ever seen, even with battle size extenders and stuff. And so just the two infantry formations alone, numbering in what seemed like the hundreds, running into each other was definitely something to see, and obviously that's going to be a regular thing in Bannerlord. So let's see. Lately, I've also been trying my hands on the scene editor, and I'm just blown away by how easily I can make something that looks pretty nice. I believe we're going to have a lot of mods with amazing visual quality. And this looks like something out of Kingdom Come Deliverance. I swear I've, you know, walked down or ridden down paths in that game that look just like this. So look, if I can make this, anyone can make something nice. Okay, I mean, you are a game dev. I think you should give yourself some credit. But anyways, let's see. So, but I have to say that I'm mostly excited with the multiplayer part of the game. I mean, that is your part, so I would think so. Before joining Tail Worlds, I spent a lot of time playing Napoleonic Wars, and I regularly attended line battles. It was always such a thrill to be part of these huge organized battles, with disciplined regiments moving around in formation, only to be struck down by a single cannonball. The smoke from the musket fire, the surprise cavalry charges, it was an amazing experience. I can't wait to see what the modding scene comes up with for Bannerlord, as the possibilities are much greater than they ever were for Warband. Yeah, I've watched some of those like organized battles, and they're really cool to watch, although a bit slow. But I sort of got the impression that they might not be as much fun to play in because you do have to really hold yourself back and not go, running off into battle, which is something I always struggle with. If you guys watch my Let's Plays, you'll know that I always sort of tell myself I'm going to be a disciplined commander and kind of hold back and issue orders, and then a second later I'm leading an infantry charge right into the front of the enemy's formation or something. So I imagine that's something that they all struggle with when they play those, but they're very, very cool to watch. And as far as the modding stuff goes, we have gotten some information on modding, especially the tools that they're going to be giving us, and the possibilities do seem much greater. If you're not familiar with how modding will work in Bannerlord, it's not the same system that they use in Warband, where it's sort of one mod at a time, and if, for example, that particular overhaul doesn't include like diplomacy, then, well, you're playing without diplomacy. In Bannerlord, you would have like a diplomacy overhaul that you can install, and then maybe a world overhaul. So like your Clash of Kings that turns everything into a Game of Thrones type setting. You could run that, and then you could run your diplomacy overhaul, and then maybe add in like freelancer, stuff like that. So you can kind of pick and choose the things you want in your experience, whereas with Warband, the mod authors sort of had to do that and decide, I want this in my mod or I don't want this in my mod, but it had to be done on their end because you could only run one thing at a time. That's no longer the case. So again, the possibilities are huge. And then in terms of the individual mods, they can get much more detailed and focused, because now they don't have to worry about, the Game of Thrones mod doesn't need to worry about, oh, am I going to include a diplomacy overhaul? They can leave that to somebody else and just make the best Game of Thrones overhaul that they possibly can. And then, if you want to add those other things to it, then of course you can. So anyways, what's the most difficult thing that you've solved so far during Bannerlord's production? So one of the hardest moments that was one of the hardest moments was definitely when we were starting out with serious regular play tests to check both the game modes and combat. At the time, we didn't have any of the automated tests we have now, so the game broke pretty regularly and in many different ways. And I've heard from a few leaks and stuff that this was a big issue for them that really slowed down development. And this sort of is in line with the engine issues they had, because they were constantly updating the engine, trying to iron out bugs there. But because they didn't have all the automation that they do now, every time they did that, they would cause an issue somewhere else. And they did have to do substantial work on the engine. So they were basically, constantly fixing one bug only to create another. And it seems like they've gotten beyond that now. They've figured out a good system, and I hope things are moving along more smoothly and we're getting close to a release. Since I was organizing these play tests, I felt very responsible for the failure or success of these tests. We would get a dozen people to stop working and help us play test, only to find out that the game wasn't playable anymore and it wasn't a waste of everyone's time. Yeah, I imagine that would be kind of embarrassing and a real bummer. So we've improved the stability a lot since then, with the help of the quality assurance team in combination with automated testing. Soon after, I could finally hear the cries of people getting killed in game throughout the office, which certainly made me feel a lot better. And then here we've got this little snippet of gameplay, and it looks a lot like multiplayer combat and Warband, people trying to circle strafe each other and swinging wildly with polearms. One thing I really liked about this, though, is if you watch the cavalry in the back, particularly this really heavy armed one, you see the guy that gets run over right there? Watch the physics of that. Not only does he get knocked down, but he gets knocked into the air and lands on his ass a couple feet back. That is what I want to see in Bannerlord. In Warband, you can, of course, knock people down with your horses, but they just kind of fall on the spot where they currently are. Imagine this, but on the scale of Bannerlord battles, a cavalry formation of like 50, mounted heavy cavalry running into an infantry formation and just the whole first line getting put on their asses like this. I cannot wait for that. Anyways, what is he currently working on? I'm currently writing some extra tools that allow us to better monitor server network usage. We're aiming to have a potential maximum player limit that is well above warbands, so it helps to be able to visualize data with real-time graphs and stats to find out about possible bottlenecks. We already have a very efficient networking system because of some great programmers on the team. I'm just making sure they can do their job even better. So what faction does he like the most? I struggle to choose between Britannia and Volandia. The Empire may be in decline and crumbling, but Britannia has long lost its glory. Its castles and towns are old and ruinous, and each visit to a settlement tells a story of a faction just desperately trying to stay relevant. I find it fun to become part of such a faction and help it to rise up. I guess my Belgian roots may have something to do with that. And I agree with him 100% here. Britannia was one of the factions that immediately drew me in because I really like the Celtic influence that it has, and it's also, I don't know how to describe it, but he explains it pretty well. All the architecture that we've seen is kind of like old and crumbly. A lot of their castles and stuff are made of like, sorry about that, somebody called me. Anyways, their castles are made of like old stone that's been grown over by moss. Or, like sharpened wooden stakes that are starting to crumble. And I just like that aesthetic. And then the fact that they're sort of like an underdog faction kind of draws me in as well. And I like the idea of, playing as maybe like a ranger type character and fighting like hit and run skirmish battles with larger factions rather than, being forced to meet out in the field like they would probably want to. So anyways, and Volandia, because it's just a classic done well, majestic and dominating castles, chivalric knights, and of course the crossbowmen. Fighting at range is by far my favorite thing to do. Both Britannia and Volandia excel at this, but the crossbow is definitely the coolest. So I like Volandia as well. In Warband, I generally favor Swadia above the other factions, and Volandia is sort of just like a natural what's the word? A natural predecessor to Swadia. They have like, I don't know if they call them knights in the game. In fact, I think we've seen somewhere that they did, but the Volandians, of course, being based on like the Normans, and then Swadia being based on like Western European kingdoms. They have that traditional sort of like knight aesthetic, and I find that to be probably the most natural playstyle for me. If you watch again my playthroughs, there's a lot of them where I just fight as heavy cavalry on horseback with a lance and a sword, and obviously those factions were sort of built around that playstyle, and so it works well for me. Not everybody plays like that, of course, and other factions work better for them, but that's sort of my preference. And I would call the aesthetic, I'm not boring, but I mean, obviously it's been done several times, and so it's nothing new, and I think that's what drew me to Britannia as well. But I agree with him that Volandia, it does seem like a cool faction, and while it is something that we've kind of seen a lot of in Warband or other games, it is done well and it does look cool, and I am drawn to it. So, will multiplayer be linked with Steam for inviting friends? We have a full Steam integration, so you'll easily be able to join friends' games or invite them to your party. Will we still be able to choose what server we join, or will it be picked for us? We will still have the server list, just like we have in Warband. It will contain both official and unofficial community-run servers. On top of that, there is also a matchmaking system which ties in nicely with our more competitive game modes. So it seems like we're getting sort of the best of both worlds here. A lot of people, I think, were concerned that they were going to go to like a full matchmaking system and that the old system would be gone, and so you wouldn't have a lot of choice regarding what servers you're joining. But it looks like they are, giving you essentially both options, so you can scroll through the list and look for something specific. For example, you know, if you're looking for a modded experience like the persistent world mods that are sort of like an RPG in Warband, they don't have like an overland map. They're set within a very large battle scene with different things that you can do, but it's almost like a mini MMO type experience. If you were looking for something like that, you can install the mod and then look through the server list and find it, instead of, you know, jumping into a matchmaking thing and hoping that you get placed there. But if you're just running native Bannerlord and you want to jump into some like captain game mode gameplay or whatever, you just, you know, jump into the matchmaking system and let it find it for you, and then it'll hopefully drop you in a fun server. So, what kind of game modes can we expect? We already know a lot about this, but let's go ahead and take a look at what he says. So, Siege has received a full overhaul. It is still all about attacking and defending an entire castle, but now with a full range of different kinds of siege weapons: ballistae, catapults, siege towers, and battering rams. So yeah, I mean, this I think was pretty obvious. Siege is a game mode that carries over from Warband, but because, you know, we know that Bannerlord has new siege mechanics, that was one of the first gameplay videos we've ever seen of it. Obviously, they would implement those in the Siege multiplayer game mode as well. Why wouldn't they? So I think that game mode will be very popular. It was popular in Warband for a while. I don't think it's particularly popular anymore, but I think it will definitely see a resurgence with all the new mechanics that they've added. Then there are some game modes that are entirely new, such as Captain Battle, a team-based mode where each player gets command over a regiment of AI troops, just like in single player. You win by either eliminating the other team or by controlling the battlefield. So we've seen a lot of gameplay of this. Essentially, you are not commanding an entire army, you're just commanding like a large squad, and each player on each team has like a different troop type. I mean, not necessarily, I think there's like a point modifier or something that sort of dictates what you can and can't choose to keep things balanced. But basically it's you, and depending on what you've brought with you, like 10 infantry or 5 cavalry or something like that, and then you have a team of a couple of other players who also have their little squads, and you're fighting for capture points. There's also Skirmish Battle, a more competitive game mode that is designed to be played 6 versus 6. You have multiple lives per round, but each troop has a different cost, which means you have to make a choice between fielding a greater number of poorly equipped troops or fewer, more specialized ones. Good communication and managing your lives are key in this mode. That doesn't sound too much different than Captain Battle, but I mean, I don't know. They'll have to clarify that, because a lot of the gameplay multiplayer stuff that we've seen, at least that I've seen, was being referred to as Captain Battle, but this almost sounds like the same thing. So I don't know what exactly the difference is there, because let's see. I mean, obviously it wouldn't just be 6 versus 6. That's a really small battle. I mean, maybe it is. Maybe it's like sort of like a team deathmatch type thing, and then you just keep respawning, but you don't get to respawn as much if you're like an elite troop versus a cheap one. Maybe it's something like that, but that seems awfully small for players only. Like, that's not a very big battle. But again, I guess if you're dying and coming back immediately, it might feel bigger. I don't know. We also have a duel mode for those who want to test their skills in a more controlled environment. So that's nice. Anyways, how do you plan to prevent camping? The solutions to prevent camping are different for many games. For us, we realized it's a serious issue, and we have designed our new game modes so that they make camping a bad choice. For skirmish and captain battles, you have to be active and either fight the enemy or move to different locations on the battlefield to control them. So with the captain battle, if it's, again, what they were initially referring to as captain battles, I think they have almost like a PUBG type mechanic. I might not be correct here, but this is the impression that I got from watching a lot of those videos, was that over the course of the battle, it slowly removes objective points from the map. So if you think about it in like a battlefield, whichever battlefield game you prefer, but if you think about it in like a battlefield sense, you have like A, B, C, and D. And essentially, as the battle progresses, objective A and D might get removed, and so it kind of focuses it more on the center of the map. And then objectives B and C might get removed, and so wait, probably should do like an odd number there. So we'll say A, B, C, D, and E. So A and E get removed, B and D get removed, and C, the center point, is the only one left. And so it essentially is focusing in the battle more and more on the center. Now, hopefully this is more fluid, so it may not always be C. If the battle is a little bit one-sided, maybe it'll be E, or maybe it'll be D, or on the other side, A or B. But the point is, you know, if somebody's camping A, that objective might get removed, and all of a sudden they're camping nothing. And so that will force you to kind of continue to move in order to play the objectives. I don't know how they're going to do that for skirmish, because I don't know much about skirmish, but I imagine it'll be similar, if not exactly the same. So it's also not enough to just move to one location and hold it. You will constantly be encouraged to move and adapt until the very end of each round. We've noticed in our internal playtests that this is working out very well. Well, that's good to hear. Internal playtests don't always cover all, you know, real-world situations, but at least they're not experiencing problems with it. So that's good. And then here we see a screenshot of, I imagine, some of the gameplay we saw in the video earlier. These factions, by the way, this guy here, I assume the cataphract on horseback there as well, and then this troop are all from the Empire. I can't quite make out what the other one is. Maybe we can get a better look here. Based on the kite shields, I would say probably Volandia, because again, they have a very Norman influence, and that is a, you know, sort of very Norman shield, although other, you know, people did of course use those kite shields. It's kind of hard to tell. They look fairly generic. Based on that helmet in the background, I would say Volandia as well, but you know, I could be wrong there. So let's see, and apparently that's the end. I don't know why they don't bother to tell us what's happening next week anymore. Maybe they haven't thought of it yet, but typically the way they do these is they do a Q&A, and then they do some like lore background stuff. So I would expect something along those lines next week. Hopefully it's not more camel BS, because frankly I'm not even going to bother if that's the case. But yeah, fingers crossed it's something good. So we'll leave it here. Let me know what you guys think of the multiplayer stuff so far, and I'll see you guys back here next week for hopefully a good developer blog video. So thanks for watching.